I need you frightened. I need you hopeless.
Welcome to the chaos. This is the Reflections of Horror podcast. We are a horror movie podcast for the girls, the gays, and the non-binary baes. I'm Lisa.
I'm Kale. And first off, Happy New Year, Lisa.
Yes.
Welcome back, everybody. We're
Happy
on break.
2025.
2025. It's going to be a great year.
We're starting off 2025 a little bit late.
Yes.
This is will be posted about a week late than what we were shooting for. So,
Yeah,
2025
okay.
Gonna 2025.
We were on holiday. I
Yes.
was listening to lots of podcasts that go or do not come until mid-January.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are we doing?
So we're ahead of the curve.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That way.
So this is the Candyman episode. For this episode, I kind of went into with the expectation that we would just focus on the 2021 adaptation.
Yes.
But you kind of can't.
Yeah,
because
kind of fell into the lore.
Yeah, a lot of the lore. So there's the OG came out in 1992, and then there's two sequels after that. I watched most of the original one. Didn't finish it though. And then I have not seen any of the sequels.
So I think in COVID, I did this find trilogies and several horror movies to watch, and I think Candyman was one of them.
Okay.
But that tells you how forgettable the other two movies
Yes. Okay.
So,
yeah, that
because I could not tell you a blip about either one of them, but I am 90% sure I've seen both of them.
Okay. Well, yeah. So we have the 92 one, and then this is kind of been described as the 2021 adaptation has been described as a spiritual sequel, right?
Okay.
From some of the stuff I've read.
Yeah.
And so it's probably going to be a discussion about both of them because there's a ton of lore that you kind of are taking from that covers pretty well throughout the movie.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to go back and watch, but I was I have to go back and watch because I'm having a deep discussion about it.
Well, and I think it does enrich it a little bit.
Yeah,
but
it
could definitely be a standalone as is.
Yeah, it makes some of the things that didn't make sense make more sense.
Yes.
If you go back and know actually what you're watching and who the characters are and stuff.
And I will say I happened to fully fall down the rabbit hole, and I stumbled across a podcast that talked about obviously Clive. I feel like Clive Barker, everybody thinks Hellraiser.
Yes.
At least that's what my brain does.
Yes.
I forget that Clive Barker, really, Candyman is his.
Yeah.
So in 1986, he wrote a short story called The Forbidden.
Mm.
I, being as obsessive as I am, had to go and read it. It is Candyman through and through. You can't even do a, they took it and ran with it. No, they took the short story and wrote it into a script. It's, I would say, 98% identical.
Yeah, and then the book or the short story was based in the UK.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
And then so that came out in 86, and then I never knew this. In 1987, in the Chicago Reader, a article was published called "They Came In Through the Bathroom Mirror." Ooh. And it is actually a true story about a Black woman that was murdered in kind of a projects-esque housing project.
Yeah.
Because they even say when she called the cops, it was so dilapidated that tenants knew to say, this is what's going on, and the elevator is working today.
Oh.
Because they wouldn't get a response from first responders and whatnot if they could not get in the elevator to get upstairs.
What?
Is what
yeah, that's crazy.
But
I believe it.
And so the way this project was built is literally between apartments there were walkways where you could get in through the bathroom mirror.
Dang.
And so that aspect of so in this podcast I was listening to, they were saying that John Malkovich, random because I don't think he has anything to do with the movies from what I was Googling.
Yeah.
But he sat down with the writer of that article and was like, I want to kind of take this and put it into a horror movie.
Okay.
So they were trying to allude to the concept of the bathroom mirror and that being a gateway for him to come in came from this article.
Okay.
Cool. Is it true? Is it not? We don't know, but I liked it. Yeah. So here we are.
It doesn't matter because it's adding another layer to the story. And I think that's a huge theme in the whole movie in general is just this folklore, how new elements are added with kind of every retelling kind of thing. So I like that. That's pretty cool. So before we dive into like summary, logline stuff, you have a little bit of a rant on trying to find the DVD.
You guys, I have issues. So 2025, it's a new year. Everybody's trying to do something different, right? So I watched 2021. I go to find the original, and obviously the original is no longer on streaming because why would you keep it permanently? I think I watched them on Tubi. Like, that just feels right.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's nowhere to be found for free on streaming. And then I'm trying to be better at, because I'm so guilty at, I'm watching my streaming service. Well, I'm just going to go and buy it on Apple TV because it's just right here at the tip of my fingers.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, this is a DVD that should be out there for me to buy for like $4.99. So I'm like, I'm gonna go to the store. Well, $65 later, I have a plethora of other DVDs I had no plan on buying.
2 different Chuckies.
Did I tell you I took the slipcover off of one? It's fucking identical. It's not 2 different ones. It is literally, one has the slipcover, one does not. And mind you, my brother bought me the 8-disc Chucky. So why did I need the 4-disc one? I don't know, but it just felt good at the time. And I still don't have the fucking original Candyman on DVD. So, but anyway, I've got a brand new stack of DVDs to add to the collection.
Add to the collection. Worth it.
I guess. Tried to be responsible. Refused to pay $13.99 to own it, and decided to go buy $65 in DVDs.
So I can't leave the house. Every time I leave the house, I spend $100. I can't not.
Well, and I got mad because I realized I think big box stores are going away with DVDs.
Yeah.
Fully.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I went to Disc Replay, which is like basically our local pawn shop, would you say? Like DVDs, games, whatever. Walmart had a tiny section. Meijer, nothing. Target, nothing. Best Buy, nothing.
Really?
I was like, I fucking hate it here.
There's a little one in Meijer. They have some decent stuff, but
I think it went away. They used to have one, and then all I could find was like, it wasn't even an end cap. It was like a cardboard pop-up that I swear to God had 4 DVDs in it.
That's so depressing.
I was like, this is stupid.
That is.
Anyway, so yeah, that's how it went, trying to find the original. And what did I do? I came home and I paid my $4.99 to rent it on digital.
There you go.
So that was the experience for me.
$69.
Yeah.
All right. So, logline. What do we got?
So, for decades, the housing projects of Chicago's Cabrini Green were terrorized by a ghost story about a supernatural hook-handed killer. In present day, an artist begins to explore the macabre history of Candyman, not knowing it would unravel his sanity and unleash a terrifying wave of violence that puts him on a collision course with destiny. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Gives us enough, but doesn't ruin it.
Yeah.
Fully.
Yeah. The destiny part is kind of interesting there.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that. Yeah. No, it's a pretty decent one.
Yeah.
So. What are we talking about?
I'm gonna start already because the moment this movie kicks on, I love the fact they put the Candyman song over the Universal logo.
Yeah.
As well as like the buzzing of bees.
Yeah.
Because like we just watched Black Christmas 2019, and when I was watching the director's cut, she was talking about how she was really bummed out because she wanted to revamp the song that plays with that opening logo, which I was like, I would never think of that. So I was like, the fact that they were like, oh no, first of all, this is
gonna do it.
A Jordan Peele. I say it's a Jordan Peele movie. It's a Monkey Paw production.
Yes.
So I think I still don't have a full grasp on writing credits. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
that makes sense because they do get a little confusing with it.
Yeah, because Nia directs it, is listed as a writer. So I'm like, okay, did Jordan Peele get writing credits just because it's for Monkey Paw Productions?
Yeah.
And he reread it and went, I love this. But whatever, it had his stamp of approval.
Nia DaCosta is our director, also writing credit, and then another person called Wynn Rosenfeld.
Yeah.
With writing credit there. So. Yeah, we gotta.
So, I mean, plunging you right into it with like, who can take the sunshine? I was like, oh, Candyman, I'm just gonna settle into this.
Excellent.
I guess sorry, this is going to be a sporadic one. I can already tell. We're out of practice, I guess. We're going to go back to our sporadic roots, the chaotic roots. Do you have any memories of doing Candyman as a kid?
No.
Like the urban legend?
No, I never did.
I do, with my older brother.
Really?
Yeah, Candyman in the mirror. I absolutely remember that in the bathroom. Hit the lights, Candyman. Yeah.
Oh
I 100% grew up on go to the sleepover, hit the lights, go in the bathroom. Can you say Candyman?
That's funny because you couldn't watch scary movies when you were younger.
Exactly.
You're trying to conjure urban legends. I think I did Bloody Mary maybe.
Okay.
And like freaked myself out, but it was like fine when I was like 10 or something. Which again I think is really interesting because like you get some parallels there with like Bloody Mary, Candyman. You know, which came first?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Good question.
Be something to look into.
Yeah. So we go from the Universal logo, and then we get our first intro to this like storytelling through puppets, like shadow puppets.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed because I think part of it is part of the dialogue around this movie, I think, is they do a wonderful job of making a Black-centered horror movie without making a spectacle of brutalizing Black bodies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And for sure.
I think
that makes sense.
I think the shadow puppet portions really help with that. If you start to notice what they depict, because like the first one is cops chasing a man.
Yep. Yeah. And it's our kind of character that'll come into play later, Billy. It opens in Cabrini Green, 1977.
Yep.
And we have this young kid who's playing with these like little shadow puppet marionette things, and like it's a police officer and like chasing down like another man and like shooting him. And then this is just what he's doing because like this is like, I don't know. I think the shadow puppets are really interesting because I think this is largely a story about storytelling, right?
Yes,
and like exploring, and exploring the different mediums through which to tell stories. So I think the shadow puppet was really creative and different.
Yeah.
And also just like like kind of artistically pleasing to watch.
Yeah.
So Billy's playing with the shadow puppets, and then he's called away to do laundry. And he picks up his laundry, and he goes, and we get this kind of view of Cabrini Green, which are like these projects. And he's wandering. He wanders past some police officers, and drops a sock, and then the cops don't do anything about him dropping the sock, and I was like, oh, dicks.
Well, I do feel like we should say, so it's a young Black man.
Yes,
and
young
they're
Black child.
Yeah, and they're white cops.
Yes.
So we're already painting this scene of like white people patrolling Black neighborhoods and how that goes.
Yep, exactly. So he goes down to do laundry. It's kind of like a not dilapidated, but like kind of like a sketchy little laundry area, and there's like a big hole in the wall, and the cinematography here was really good because it was really creepy because you could just kind of get a look in the background and like just a little bit of movement while you're kind of focused on Billy.
Because I think the first bit we see is at one point he's facing the laundry room. And the light in the laundry room goes out, so then you see the reflection of the hole.
In the
so
door.
It's very creepy. I will say I made a note. There's a cute little nugget of like a sign hanging next to the light for an extermination company that has a cartoon bee on it. I was like, I like that.
I like that too. I like that. My second watch.
Yeah.
This is actually my third watch because I did see it in theaters in 2021.
Jealous.
Yeah.
I don't remember when I watched it. I can guarantee I just bought it at home and watched it on my couch.
Well, kind of on that note, Candyman had a delayed release due to COVID, so it was largely filmed in 2019, and then was released in 2021, which I think is interesting. Just of like, so kind of it was already in production and written and stuff.
Yeah.
When the George Floyd protests were happening. So I just wonder,
that's
like,
interesting timing. Yeah. I didn't realize that it got delayed because this came out just around a year after the George Floyd murder.
Yeah. So it's it just makes me think about like if that changed anything in the plot, or if or what it would have looked like if it was still in production, or maybe pre-production while the protests and stuff were happening.
Yeah.
And like what Candyman would look like in like post George Floyd kind of world. Because I do think a lot of things changed, you know.
Yes.
I think anyway. So Billy sees Candyman.
Yes.
First, he drops some candy
into
the thing, and sees Candyman, starts like screaming, making a ruckus, because you know I'd probably scream too. I'd be like, oh my God. And we cut to the cops outside, and they're
finally
hustling,
having a response.
Yeah, they're hustling in. And then we get cutscene to Cabrini Green in 2019.
So I'm going to be insufferable because I have so many parallels between the original and this one. So before we get to Cabrini Green in 2019, you get your credits.
Oh, yeah.
So the credit sequence in the original is above the Chicago streets. And in this one, they flipped that. And you're basically looking at the clouds, but you're still getting the skyscrapers. And I was like, that's sick to me. That is so cool. You're giving a nod to the original. They also keep like the lettering of the font. Again, not identical, but similar. So like if Candyman is your movie, you're watching this movie like frothing at the mouth. Finding like the little nuggets that they pay homage to.
And I think that's kind of cool, especially with like the shot like above the city versus below the city, in the city, right? We're literally flipping the perspective, because like the perspective of the first one was from Helen's perspective, and written by a white man and stuff, and now we totally are flipping the script, right, and making it a black centered story.
Well, that's why I'm obsessed with this, is because like they took a black story, made it white centered in the original, and Monkey Paw Production was like, no, Candyman is actually ours and ours to keep, and we're doing this our way.
I know, and
he did it perfectly. And I fucking did that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
fucking rocks.
So yes, now we're in Cabrini Green, 2019. We're at dinner with Anthony, who's our main character, we can say.
Protagonist.
Yes. His wife, her gay brother, Troy, and his white boyfriend.
Yes, Grady.
I say white boyfriend because he does say, I don't want to say some problematic things, but like I love that we, like, in this movie, I feel like every white character we come across is kind of insufferable.
Yeah, kind of fucking terrible.
Yeah,
no, definitely.
Yeah.
I feel that
so, yeah, and then we kind of get into our first little, like, bout of storytelling.
Yeah.
And, Troy kind of goes into the urban legend of Candyman, and I like the fact that the way he tells the urban legend of Candyman really is the story of the first movie.
Yes.
So,
exactly. It's the
again,
whole story.
To your point, like, if you haven't watched the first one, I feel like they give you enough. You're still going to have an understanding.
And what I think is interesting is that the story that he's telling about, like, what is essentially like the OG story, right? There's some details that are a little bit different, right? And I think that's just a really interesting testament on how, like, when we're doing this oral storytelling, when we're, you know, passing along urban legends, how stories will change over time.
Yeah.
And how the way people tell stories influences the next iteration of it, right? It's just that's just the way that urban legends and folklore develop. But so he's telling the story, and we get another shadow puppet animation of like of Helen's ordeal.
Basically, the story he's telling, we get it in our shadow puppet explanation.
So,
and through this, we basically learn, again, they're living in the gentrified area of Cabrini Green. Is what we land on.
Yeah. So, you know, we're several decades in the future, right? And it's been gentrified. It's been built up, and basically, like, there's like hardly anyone who actually live in the Cabrini Green projects anymore. They're just pretty much abandoned, emptied.
Yeah.
And yeah, they have a really interesting discussion about yeah, no one, like, they built the projects, right, and then they kicked everyone out once they realized that they made the projects.
Which is real.
It is.
I mean,
real.
it's storytelling of a true existence.
Yeah.
Through all this, we also learn Anthony's a little bit of a struggling artist. So we get our first introduction that he's some variation of a painter, and his career is not incredible.
Yeah, he hasn't painted in a while. Yeah. He's has all of his old paintings up, and
I have made several notes throughout this movie. How did you feel about the use of technology?
Oh.
You didn't clock it?
I didn't
I thought you would love it, because we've been on this rant of technology affecting things. So after this, you see Anthony is on his phone and is Googling the urban legend he told.
Yeah.
And then it's right after that, he's shown on his laptop, Googling it more. And I'm like, that's very accurate to how that would go.
That is. Yeah, no, that is really accurate. And him standing there brushing his teeth, and he's like, oh, she really did cut off the head of a Rottweiler. And Brianna, his partner, is like, can we stop?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Which is so real to how someone will just get hyper-fixated into their phone, and you're like,
hello?
Can we move on now? So after this, we get a cut scene, and to our talk of problematic white people, he is meeting with a white art dealer that is just painful to listen to, is what I would say. I don't really have a lot to say about it, because he's just being a dick and is basically trying to tell Anthony what he should do with his art. And Anthony's like, that's
not how it works.
It's not it.
My note there is cutscene daytime. Anthony is talking to some immediately irritating white man who I hate and want to shut up. So that's whatever his name is. Didn't even write his name down. Don't care.
And then from here, I would say, cinematically, this movie is very pleasing, and I think it's a very beautiful movie, and I think it's also really awesome because the way they shoot it, it's really a little bit of a love story and showcasing the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
So from here, we get a couple wide shots of, I think, just maybe him walking home or him walking somewhere, but they're very wide, so you see the landscape and the skyscrapers and the buildings and what neighborhood he's in. So I think if you're from Chicago, I don't know how you would not be absolutely obsessed with this movie.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's it's awesome because I feel so many, especially urban centric kind of movies, set in cities and stuff. It's always set in New York.
Yeah.
Right? And it's Chicago has so much history and so much influence that I don't think it's given enough credit.
Oh, no, not at all.
Not just saying because we're Illinois.
No, I mean, I grew up in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Had no concept of Chicago and what it had to offer.
Yeah.
None.
And that's crazy. You know? I think that's crazy because it's a great city.
So, but he's taking photos, basically trying to find the places he found on Google in this story to take photos now decades later. And this is where he gets his first bee sting.
Yes, he gets stung by a bee. I think also just the shot of him going through and taking photos also a good callback to the OG because Helen's the main character of the OG, and she's researching Cabrini Green and folklore and stuff like that.
How cringy is that we sent a white grad student to the projects to research Black people
who exist.
What are we doing?
So it's kind of a cool reclaiming because he's researching this to tell their story through an artistic lens instead of studying them there's something to be studied, right? So the first time I watched this, I was confused about the bees. But I watched it again and I was like, okay, now the bees make sense.
I get the bees now.
Yeah, I get the bees now, but I was like, what's up with the bees the first time I was watching it?
I guess that would be true. If you were not familiar with the first one, you'd be like, why?
Yeah.
Because I guess, I didn't fathom that because I've seen the first one.
Yeah.
So, the moment it hit, I was like, here they come.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because, even though he's studying this this history and stuff, he's still kind of largely doing it as an outsider. Even though he's even though we learned later, he has more connection to Cabrini Green than we expected. I think that his perspective, he's still studying it, and he's still like gathering these stories and this information to put in his art and then be famous, which is interesting.
Yeah, I guess I didn't look at it that way. Like, I was seeing it as he was really becoming obsessive over I mean, at the end of the day, he was just doing it to try to get famous and kind of ride the coattails of this urban legend. But I more looked at it as like an obsession.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's
the way that I watch a movie and then watch the director's commentary and then watch every YouTube video. Like, it's an identical situation.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so he's taking pictures, gets stung by a bee, ducks the police, and encounters a man named Billy Burke, who is the adult of the Billy that we saw in the beginning of the movie.
Yes. Which we don't find that out till later.
Yeah, that's true. We don't. But we kind of he learns some more about like the legend.
Yeah. And again, we get this moment of like oral storytelling because they go to his laundromat. He's the owner of the laundromat, and he kind of sits.
Laundry.
Yeah.
Chekhov's laundry man.
True. And then he kind of sits down and he's like, well, tell me about Candyman.
Yeah.
And he just kind of unloads more information to him.
He goes, I think particularly interesting with his phrasing, and he's like, for me, Candyman was a man named Sherman, who was like, he was framed for giving a little white girl candy with a razor blade in it. Yeah. And I think that like that, for me, is also like a big testament of like how these stories are passed, right? They're because it's like for him, for the versions of the story that he has heard and his own experience, right? It's just that for me, I thought was really interesting. I think it just says a lot about folklore.
Well, because he explicitly says, he goes, the stories in the paper aren't the true story, or like isn't the whole story.
Yeah.
And I will say, we get this flashback as he's telling this story, and it is not in Shadow Puppets. It is how it happened.
Yeah.
And this is the first bit of violence we see on a black man, because the cops, we pick up where we left off, where he's yelling and the cops are scrambling in, and basically the cops just come barreling down this staircase.
Yeah.
Don't really even stop at the kid and go, are you okay? Whatever, can we help you? They just go barreling down and just unload into this guy in the basement and just kill him without really even a blink of an eye or a pause.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I think that there's some like kind of implication in the way that like Billy is telling the story, and just the way that the way cops are utilized in the narrative is that like they're kind of the real ghosts of the story.
Yeah.
I think like they're the things doing the haunting.
Yes.
Which I just think is interesting, and Billy has more to say about that later.
Well, and I think he even says like, Candyman didn't hurt me, he just gave me candy.
Yeah.
And then in that scene, as they're killing him, we get one single bee near the kid.
Yeah.
It's like, the bees are growing, they're coming.
They are. Okay, so after so Billy kind of finishes the story, and we get cutscene back in the apartment.
Yes. I was gonna say, I did like the update to this original of Candyman, because like the OG Candyman, it was a slave that had been beaten and tarred.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, like you were saying, this is really the updated version of Candyman. This is the post George Floyd Candyman, where he was killed by cops for no real reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, sadly, that's a really good touch on the urban legend.
It is. It absolutely is. So Anthony is talking about the story to Brianna, and he's describing like Sherman's story, like the story that he heard from Billy. And I think it's interesting because he says, and that's how it starts, after just describing Sherman's part of the story, instead of going back and talking about like Helen. So he's pulling, again, just parts of the story out and relaying it with this like certainty of like, this is what happened, right? But yeah, we kind of get here that he's developing this obsession. Like he's fully on board with it. He leaves out Helen's part of the story, and yeah, just that editing of it as you pass it along, I think is just really interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Right before that, we did get a shot of him in his studio on Google with the bloody photos, and he's just going to town on trying to paint some stuff.
Yeah.
And the wife pops in and says, "Hey, you forgot about dinner at your mom's or whatever."
Yep.
So, like, to this obsession tale that we're starting to spin, or snowball that we're starting to get into, it's definitely starting to become all consuming.
Yes.
But then too, when he's talking to the wife about everything, and then he goes, "I want to summon him." Did you catch Candyman in the reflection of the window?
I didn't.
So this was the first time I caught it, because I know for a fact I have not caught it in previous watches.
Yeah.
So they're basically sitting in the living room, and it's not a mirror, it's just like a window to outside. And he's joking around going, "I want to summon him." And he's like, "Candyman, Candyman." And she's like, "You better fucking stop."
Yeah.
Like, whatever. And they say it, and then, like, I forget exactly how they spin it, but our vantage point spins a little bit, and it's very faint. But the reflection of Candyman is in the window, and I'm like, he's here, but
that's really good. So what's interesting though is does Anthony ever say Candyman 5 times? I don't think he does, because that's not where his connection to Candyman is.
I think he does. Or between the two of them, they say it 5 times.
Okay, I'll have to go back and count, because I was like thinking about rewinding to watch that part again, and then I didn't. But I don't think he says it 5 full times. But anyway, part of this section where he's like talking to Brianna and stuff, I'm just like brought back to how obnoxious it can be to date an artist, though. Like I love artists. They're amazing, but sometimes dating them is a fucking nightmare, because they're so in their art. And I'm like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I understand the obsession, but please.
Yeah.
So we get another cutscene.
Yep.
And we are at an art show.
Yep.
Where his art is displayed.
Which part of that ranting scene, he had a piece of art where he's telling this story and trying to be like, "This is great," and the wife's essentially like, "It's like a bit straightforward, and you're really just like recreating the violence." So we see he went with mounting a mirror, and then in the art show, and like you can open it, and when you look in, there were other pieces of art, but I mean, the installation itself was basically try to summon Candyman in the mirror. I will also say, I feel like the beginning of the art show, we're really just following white people around at first.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So the first girl we see ends up being the girl in the school scene. And then we land on yet again another white art critic this time. So
yeah, and she's there, and she's, he's hovering around his art piece, and then he kind of tumbles into like this explanation of it, right? And like she doesn't seem to get it, kind of thing, and he's getting a little upset. She's like, she basically is like, it's gimmicky, right? And I think that there was a really interesting line though, because she ends up talking about like gentrification, right, of like the neighborhood, and she says, I think a lot of the horror in this movie actually is like the not so subtle, but still like not blatant, but like the subtle like racism in language, right? Where it's like the other art aggression. Yeah, the other art dealer, he refers to, he's like, "Tell your boy," to like Brianna, and like, your boy, and then the art critic is like, something and like, your kind,
your kind, your people,
just like the disgusting like white privilege of her being able to say something like, say your kind to a black man, and then like kind of innocently be like, "I meant artists," was so infuriating.
But again,
right?
I think this is what Jordan Peele does amazing. And
absolutely.
Again, credit to Nia, she ran the show, but like, I think within Monkey Paw Productions, I would imagine he is only picking up movies that run with this theme of the tiny fucking microaggressions that Black people deal with every fucking day.
And the way that they pile on.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, and then there's another one where it's like just referring to Anthony as like an object to someone else, like your boy, her man, stuff like that. It's like those subtle microaggressions.
Yeah.
But then we get so we have the art critic.
Can I talk about some comedic relief that gets sprinkled in?
Yes.
I made a note, so it's like that interaction with the art critic finishes, they walk away, and then we get the brother and the white boyfriend, and the white boyfriend's like, let's try to summon Candyman, and the brother goes, this ain't the bayou, like, like, that's perfect. That is perfect. Because again, it's like, I don't know, it, like, to me, that's so Chicago. Like, that's a statement you would hear somebody say in Chicago, like, this ain't the fucking bayou, like, shut up.
That part was really good.
Yeah.
So Anthony's having a little bit of a breakdown after his conversation with the art critic. Like, he's like upset that she doesn't get it, and he kind of lashes out at
well, he starts binge drinking.
Yeah.
To cope.
Yes.
As one would.
As
one
does.
Yeah, as one does. So yes, proceeds to get drunk and then lashes out something serious.
Yeah, and then kind of like storms out, leaves the place, and then we get kind of like a cutscene to now the show is over, everything's closed, and we have I did write down his name. The art dealer got Clive and Jerrod.
Yes.
Which is also
I was like, Jerrod was a fucking choice.
Yeah, like a white intern art student, very so we're getting like it's a dual scene, right?
Yes.
We're getting cuts from one scene and then cuts into the art show scene too. And what was the other scene that was
so basically we've got Clive and Jerrod really like talking about summoning Candyman, acting like they're gonna fuck in the art.
Clive's so gross.
He's nasty.
He's like made some comment about like necrophilia.
Yeah.
And like, awful. Not funny.
All the while, we have Anthony who's like in a trance almost, like painting. I think just like painting away at something. Mm-hmm. Like I think what we're seeing mostly is just like his head a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, Clive and Jerrod fuck around and find out, essentially.
It's so Jerrod gets her throat slit by the hook, and I thought it was kind of like poignant and funny, because like Clive is just watching her bleed out on the floor, and he's like, "Is this real?" Yeah, and I'm like, that would be my reaction too. I'd be like, "Are you fucking with me? Like, what's happening right now?" And
I love, so at one point, I don't know if they tried to do like a sub dom thing, but like she had like a thing where she like hooked him to her. Yeah. So then when she gets her throat slit, he's like, oh my god, and is trying to like, and is like trying to unhook himself from now a dead body. So I was like, well, this is, you have this coming. And then he tries to get out. Candyman goes for his Achilles first. Oh yeah. And I was like, oh god, just slit my throat, please. Don't go for my Achilles first.
Yeah. On that note, I will say I love the gore elements in this movie because they're very striking, but there's not really a lot of them. Yeah. The ones that there are, it's very like, ugh, you know. And I like that because, you know, I love gore. I love body horror. I love all that. Yeah. But I like it especially when it is used that way. Yes. Where it is like used, I guess, tastefully, but like I like the gratuitous gore too. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But I like it when some thought is put into it of like, yes, we're gonna make this scene have an impact. Yes. Yeah. In particular, and I think it does a really good job. Yeah. On the note of body horror, though, Anthony's painting and freaking out and stuff, and he looks at the bee sting on his hand.
I described it as necrotic. Yeah. That was the only way I could think of it.
It is not just a bee sting, man. It is like he looks like his skin is falling off. Yeah. And like he's pulling parts of himself off. And I'm like, how are you not?
I had a moment where I was like, leave it to a man. Yeah, right. A man would let this happen to his hand and up his entire body before he goes, man, something's probably wrong here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So kind of get another cutscene, and it's the morning, and Brianna's going into the art show space, and
Have we said that she's an art dealer? Have we explained that?
no, I don't think so. She's an art dealer. She's involved in the art scene, and she got Anthony into the show.
Yeah.
Actually, and there was some like kind of like give and take with not give and take, but like some like critique on Clive's part of her, where it's like, you just put your boyfriend in the show, right? And so I think she's just a really interesting character that we don't really get a lot from until a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she goes and she discovers Clive and Jerrica dead. And then we get like cutscene to Anthony
I'm
hearing
realizing this is like kind of a fast-moving movie.
It is, yeah.
Like I know
quite quickly.
As we're discussing this, I'm like, damn, they really do like.
Yeah.
Here are your plot points. You're getting this. We're moving you along.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I like a slow burn, but I also like a movie that knows what it's.
They're getting to the point.
Yeah. But this scene where Anthony learns about the murders is crazy because they say the name of his artwork and his name on the news. Yeah. And he's like, he's just learning that these people that he knew were murdered and died, and his partner found them. But it's just this like quiet glee that consumes him of like, they're like, they said my name. They said my name on TV, right? And that's like everything an artist wants.
I love the way they shot it because you're really close to like his eyes and his face, and then you kind of zoom out a bit.
Yeah.
And he has that moment of like, they said my name.
Yeah.
And they zoom out all the way, and it's the sister and the brother sitting on the couch, kind of like looking at him like
what the fuck is wrong with you?
Fuck?
Yeah. And he's just like, so he's possessed by this story, right?
Yeah.
He's possessed by the story, but I think he's also, in true, sometimes true for artist fashion, like possessed by his own ego too.
Yeah.
So we learn, we get a cutscene to Brianna's past.
Well, it's like a quick montage, and it kind of gets you like, what is this? Yeah. Where am I at now? Who is this?
Yeah.
But it kind of takes you to a young girl. There's a man seated in a window facing out, ready to attempt suicide.
Yeah.
We find out. And then so it's that. Then we cut to her, wife's name? Brianna, present day, in bed. Candyman's in the corner. And then she wakes up.
Yes. Yeah. So we get like kind of which is so interesting to me because like so she's dating like another crazy artist, right? Her dad, because it was also like they're in an art studio, so her father was also an artist, and that's alluded to later where her brother is like, well, maybe we should put some of his stuff in a collection. She's like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But I thought that this was an interesting touch because like, first, what was her father possessed by to kill himself in front of his child?
Yeah.
That's so like possessed by something or possessed by mental illness or something like that. And it's like this perpetuation of trauma, I think was just a really...
Was it Candyman?
Right? Or yeah, exactly. And it's like just leaving that question of like, either way, it is like this perpetuation of some kind of trauma.
Yeah.
And I think, largely this story is about a lot of things, but it also is about like generational trauma and how that is passed down one after the other for each iteration,
I read into this as that is essentially where they took Candyman. For me, my reading on this. It was very much, I'm jumping ahead here, but we're on the topic. We'll circle back around later on. But this concept of the beehive and several bees and several Candymen, so to speak.
Yeah.
To me, that's what it was. Yeah. It's just this passing of trauma from black man to black man to black man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think that was, because there was a little bit of that in the OG, right?
Yeah.
But you get a kind of wider lens from it where we learn that it's not just like the first man that Helen was researching. It's not just Sherman. Like there have been others, right? Other iterations of Candyman that have like come through the year, all based off of like these stories of these black men being murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's Billy Burke says some interesting stuff about that too that I'm going to quote later, but yeah, so we get Brianna some of her backstory, and
I will say when she wakes up, I made the note that cinematically, her view of Anthony in the bathroom matches where Candyman was when we got that flash. And I was like, that's a good touch.
Cinematically very interesting. And Anthony's being kind of sketchy. Like,
I said,
freaked out.
I said, Anthony's in the bathroom being weird as fuck.
Yeah, because he is. He's just standing there staring at a running sink. And she's like goes in there and she's like, baby, what's wrong? And like trying to get him to come back to bed. And he just simply closes the door.
Yeah.
Closes, just like, goodbye.
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, I freak out.
Which she does eventually. I mean, she leaves, but
yes,
we'll get there. We're sorry. We got to get back into our rhythm, people. I'm back to my chaotic energy, but that's okay. I just get too excited.
That's what makes us entertaining.
Yeah, that's why we always say, welcome to the chaos.
So we get another cutscene. Anthony is in the library, and he is picking up some recordings that Helen from the OG had.
Yep.
Like like the librarian is like, I don't know how you knew that we had these, but here you go.
Yeah.
And then it's him. I love the cinematography of the scene because it's so like liminal space, long hallways, kind of weird, which is like my favorite kind of like aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
And he's listening to Helen talk about like her research, right?
I will say I love that, like, I made my point about technology earlier, but what did they give him at the library? It's like a cassette recorder with like old school headphones.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, it took us back a little bit there, but okay.
So I wrote down some notes from like what Helen was saying because I think they're really like pertinent into like what the story means, right?
Yeah.
So Helen's voice recording goes, some of the things that have happened over the years, it's almost as if violence becomes a ritual. Like she's talking about like gang violence here. And she's speculating on the relationship with the police. And then she says, I mean, it's clear that no one person makes this up. This grew from the community's collective subconscious. A survival tool evolved from the need to protect itself and its children from the horrors of the community. Bernadette and I tried the summoning. It's amazing how effective it can be. The suggestion that you're being followed or stalked by something lurking in your own reflection. There's a lot of mirror imagery in here too. But I get it. It's something intoxicating, inexplicably alluring about the promise of seeing a ghost. So again, it's this weird kind of like, almost like fetishization of this community that she's studying, right? Yeah. And I think it's interesting of like how she is looking at Candyman as this survival tool to protect itself from the violence within the community instead of the violence that is happening to the community.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so interesting of like, this is the perspective that she has because she's like outside, and of course she's demonizing this community that she's studying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Anthony is still listening, and then he's in the elevator, and it is full of mirrors.
It's all mirrors.
Yes. Ain't great for him. It's kind of freaking out a little.
Yeah, as one would, I suppose. Oh, a piece of candy gets dropped from above, and it has a razor blade in it.
Yes.
And that's when you're like, oh shit, it's about to pop off.
Yeah. And so he's looking in this basically this box of mirrors, right? And he's kind of then he looks up, and his reflection is Candyman.
Yes. But like
demonic.
Yeah, like so again, to what you were saying, we're getting all these mirror images, and we get a lot of reflections of Candyman, but like the reflection of Candyman is, well, I guess it's because you're getting this version's Candyman. It's a brutalized face, like one of the eyes looks like swollen and red. It's not, I don't want people to think OG Candyman if they've seen the original. Like that is not the imagery we're getting.
Yeah, that's true. It is the same actor though.
Yes,
which is great. Anyway, yeah, it's just the scene, the hallway, or not the hallway scene, the elevator scene is just so good because it is like so unsettling. And then elevator opens, a bunch of students there, and he's just on the floor freaking out, and he's like pulls himself together and leaves.
Yeah.
So then I think it's another cutscene, and then we get to him visiting the art critic.
No, we get a cut to him in his art studio.
Oh,
and
yes.
He,
Okay.
again, this obsession and almost like possession at this point, because he's working so feverishly.
Yeah.
Like, he's got these massive canvases, and he's just, yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is someone who's possessed that's really going to town.
Yeah,
and he's listening to the tapes, and again, to like technology, he's listening to the tapes and his phone is buzzing.
Yeah.
And it's like, so all of us have had that moment where you're like engulfed in something and you're not paying attention to your phone. I think the first one might say mom.
Oh, the first call?
Yeah, I think the first one says mom.
Okay, I missed that.
We get a name that you
Yeah.
can tell he's just ignoring, and then it buzzes again and he picks it up.
Okay, and then this is the art critic calling to talk to him because, you know, after all the murders, his name is in the news. There's a renewed interest here.
It's
sensationalized.
It is,
now.
it is a way for her to capitalize on his experience, like we were saying about our girl Helen and so many other people that navigate life like this.
I will say, like, obviously he's gonna be excited about it, but he's like so happy and so excited that she's calling that I put in my notes and I was like, it's a little pathetic.
Yeah.
So yeah, he meets with the art critic in her apartment. And they're talking, she's like talking about like how interested she is in it now, and like how like it's like just build her new built up interest, and he's kind of like, well, you didn't really like my art in the art show. And I thought that like that give and take was a little bit really interesting. And then he essentially dares her to go and try it and say the name. And then she does. She goes into the bathroom. Starts to say
and we see, so we get a little bit of a cut scene of she goes to the bathroom, and then we get a cut scene at some point along the way, which we skipped over. The wife had said, hey, we have plans with XYZ, like, don't forget.
Yep.
So we get a scene of the wife is clearly on her way to dinner alone. And then we get back in, and the critic is in the bathroom.
Yes, critic is in the bathroom. She is saying Candyman. And again, there's this like interesting scene where he's in this kind of weird hallway in her apartment. Right? That is like kind of reminiscent to some other settings in the OG, I feel like. But what I really like of what they do with the setting in this film is that like playing into that like liminal space, kind of like weird long hallways in between spaces, like unsettling things, is just really building up like this dread. Right? Of just with the use of space, not even like it's doing a bunch of things to build up dread, but I just really loved what it did with the use of space and like the way the figure is navigating the space is just like claustrophobic, but also, you know, when you're in something that's too big, it also is like overwhelming in a kind of claustrophobic way, but opposite. There's probably a word for that, but I can't think of it right now.
I'm definitely not providing it for you.
And he sees a mirror and he sees Candyman.
So he's starting to trip out, basically.
And pretty much.
Like at one point he starts like picking at his fucking scab and his necrotic hand, and she's basically been in the bathroom so long, I think he kind of goes to check on her, like starts walking that way. And then I think as she's saying Candyman, he appears. So, and it's an interesting moment because it's like, it almost takes you back to childhood where like you see your reflection and you kind of do that. Okay, is it going to follow my hand? Is it going to follow my hand? And he's kind of doing that, but it's him face to face with fucking Candyman. So he only makes it so far of the moving and having it be identical, and then he's basically like, I need to get the fuck out of here.
I think also the use of mirrors and reflection and like Candyman reflecting back on people. I just want to know, because in the OG, mirrors were also prominent, right? But how far back in the sequence of folklore did the mirrors get added, right? Because there was no mirrors referenced in like the Robotai who was the first iteration of Candyman, right? But the bees were added there.
Yeah.
So I just like think about like how every time it's told, a new layer, a new part of the story kind of gets crammed in there. And I just wonder like how far back do the mirrors go, you know, because I don't think they were there the whole time.
Yeah.
I love the way that they layer stories and stuff. And then you're also getting this new layer of it with Anthony's story and like all of this like intrigue around these murders that have happened. It's its own folklore like developing like right in front of us.
Well, and I think it's really interesting that the mirror for so many people is a point of fear, right? Because they're summoning him, and then when he appears, he's terrified.
Yeah.
And Anthony, it's like he's almost trying to navigate a relationship with him.
Yeah.
Like if it is a friend or a father or a brother that he has not seen in so long, because when he shows up, it's never immediate, overwhelming terror.
Yeah.
After the elevator scene. So the elevator scene is like his first like, oh my God. And then really if you start to pay attention, the more he pops up, like it's like he's getting more comfortable with him.
Yeah, there's a curiosity there instead of like a terror, which is really like an old familiarity, right? Which is
and then so he panics and he goes to leave, and then dare I say we get probably one of the coolest and most beautiful kill scenes in a movie.
Yes. Oh my God. It's so
because
good.
Again, I feel like it's such a nod to Chicago because he runs, and as he's running out of the apartment, the camera starts to basically zoom out and come out of the building. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to see the skyscraper, which, like, the reality of probably a lot of people's lives in Chicago is that's what you watch. That's what you see every day. Yeah. And literally, as it's slowly zooming out, you see her, if you look closely, I mean, if you're not paying attention, I guess you could miss it.
You could miss it, yeah.
But you see her get picked up inside the apartment and then dragged across the glass, leaving a blood streak. And I was like, that's pretty so cool.
Good. And it's like that's so like horrific and gory, and like you're so far removed from it though that you can only imagine kind of like what is going on inside that apartment, like screaming and stuff, but you can't hear it, you can't see any of that. And I think that just makes it so much more powerful than if we were right in there and we just saw it, we were in the apartment and saw it happen. It's like this weird spectator-ness that makes me like uncomfortable.
It's voyeuristic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's very voyeuristic. Just one of the best kills for sure.
Yeah. And then we get our cutscene and find out Anthony does eventually make it to dinner because he is at dinner with the wife and a table full of black men and women, and then one
white guy,
rich white man.
Yeah.
And I was like, funny how that goes. This is going to be insufferable again. And I didn't make notes of the conversation because again, it kind of ran the gambit of art, and then some problematic comments from the rich white guy, and just kind of still carrying that vibe.
Yeah.
And then the news breaks of the art critic being murdered. Mm-hmm. And he basically panics and leaves.
Completely not suspicious, getting up and running out after hearing that, after he was literally the last person to see her alive.
Yeah.
Anthony, what are we doing, honey?
Well, and then where else are you going to go but directly to the laundromat?
Yeah.
And ask questions about Candyman.
Yeah, be like, what is going on? And then we get more layers to this story, like, because prior to this, like, us as the audience, we didn't know how far back it goes, right?
Yeah.
We only knew about, like, Sherman's story. And then he talks about, like, the original Candyman and, like, how he was essentially lynched, charred, like, torn apart and covered with honey from bees for having fallen in love with a white woman in like the late 1800s kind of thing. And Billy says something really interesting where it's like a story like that a pain like that lasts forever. That's Candyman. Candyman is how we deal with the fact that this happened, that it's still happening.
Well, and he goes on to say, it's not a he, but the whole damn hive.
Yeah.
And says it's a collection of black men who've been brutally murdered for no real reason.
Yeah. And
that's when I was like, they fucking nailed this movie. Like, this movie is so fucking good.
Yeah. And I think that this is also like a callback to how wrong Helen's perspective is, because, she said it's a survival tool for the community consciousness of the violence that's happening inside itself, right? But it is actually evolved from the community protecting itself from the horrors committed by the oppressors that made the community the way it is, right? And it's like it's like the horror is refocused on the actual evils, right? And instead of on the community that's been cut off and left to die, essentially. And I think that's just so great. It's such a nuanced, perfect reframing of it. That story, the new layers to the story and stuff, and he's kind of losing his mind, I think, under the weight of learning about this trauma and learning about what's going on, and what has happened. And he goes back to the apartment and is freaking out, and Brianna finds the new paintings that he's been doing. And she's like, what the fuck is this?
Basically. To which he's like, don't look at it, don't look at it. It's like, okay, well, you're only digging yourself deeper here, my guy.
Literally.
And it was interesting because I felt like this was where we see the roles have really flipped here, because she goes, I'm going to summon him just to show that he's not real. And he loses his mind and breaks the mirror. And then that's when she's like, okay, she's like, I'm going to my brother's. Like, you are completely unhinged.
Which,
and
very fair. And I think that that's really interesting too. While she's he's being violent towards her, kind of, right? Not directly at her, but he's bearing the weight of learning about all this trauma, right? And he is lashing out in fear, in whatever, and frightening her and adding to her pain. And I think that that's also a really good touch, where it's not directly violent at her, but him bearing the weight of all of this is scaring her, right? And it's that makes me think of how hurt people and how that can tumble into
I mean,
domestic violence and stuff like that.
His character arc gets very dark.
Oh, absolutely.
So then, she's at the brother's house, and like we talked about earlier, this is when we get a little bit more of her backstory, because brother starts talking about dad and going and getting some of his stuff. And I will say, I know we talk about tropes and putting people in boxes, but I am all for the gay character being comedic relief.
Oh, yeah.
Because the brother's really funny.
He is
and
so
he
funny.
is the source of really any comedy we get in this movie, I think, comes from him or him and his boyfriend. So I'm in full support of that.
Yeah,
but
we love Troy.
Then we cut to school with young girls.
Yes, we do.
Which I thought this was an interesting touch.
Yeah, how so?
Because it's granted, the main girl in this piece, in this scene, was at the art show.
Yes.
So you could argue she was touched by Candyman because she was in that environment. I don't know how we want to do that.
Yeah.
But it's this has nothing to do with Anthony.
No.
None of these characters are in his family, in the circle.
Yeah.
It was just her connection to that art show that takes all these fucking kids out. But I don't know if you want to get at, again, urban legends and the spreading of stories and how it can get to different communities and different age groups and whatever, because it's really just it's a white girl that is in the bathroom, and I said what appears to be 4 white girls and 1 Asian girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I made that note because I think it's really funny because it's the 4 white girls and Asian girl, and as they start to do Candyman, the Asian girl split.
Yeah, she's like,
I'm fucking out.
Yeah.
So she runs out. And they summon it, and nothing happens at first.
Yeah.
And then a black girl comes in.
Yes.
Who is clearly in a little bit of a panic over something, and kind of just tries to go into one of the stalls and hides, puts her headphones on.
Yes. And, the other girls are saying something snarky, and they're going to leave the bathroom because they're like, whatever, nothing's happening. And this, true to the time, this one girl is like, shit, I forgot my vape, runs back over, and then that's kind of where shit hits the fan.
Yeah. I basically just said, homegirl in the stall puts her headphones on, and then everybody just starts to get slaughtered.
Well, and I think that, so this is very, slasher vibe, right? It's really, really good, actually, too, because you only, again, very, restrained use of gore, right? You have one girl looking under the bathroom stall. You can't see the feet of the other girl, but you just, a couple of drops of blood, and then just a sheet of it.
It looks like, it looks like somebody just dumped blood, and you're like, okay, well, she's gone.
Yeah, but naturally, someone else, another girl goes over to check on her, and then someone drops, a compact mirror, and the girl in the bathroom stall is essentially watching this happen through this reflection.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so, also, really good, kind of kill scene, and I think that the sound mixing in that scene was so good. It makes up for the lack of gore that you see blatantly on screen.
Yeah.
But on the note of what the purpose of this was, right? I think you hit it on the nose, where it's this is the way urban legends are spread, right? Where she was like, I was there, I'm gonna try it. Why not? And then of course, who would do that? A bunch of little white girls who are fucking around with things that they don't understand, right?
Yeah.
Naturally, and for their own entertainment and titillation and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just that is another layer to this building of this Candyman folklore that we're seeing in the film now, is that a bunch of high school girls murdered by Candyman, that's going to go, but we don't know where the origin of it started, right?
Yeah.
That's just going to be perpetuated and retold and retold and retold.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a little bit of a jump, but just the way that things change as you're telling them, right? Yeah. This weird game of telephone, I think, is also directly related to this perpetuation of stereotypes, and the way that stories that are told about people of color are just told in telephone, where we're just are buying these stories and just being oh yeah, well, the projects are the way they are because of the gangs, not knowing why, not knowing all of the history and all of the pieces of the story that make up the reality, right? So it's just, it can be used as a storytelling can be used as both a tool of expression and then also oppression.
That's true,
right? Depending on who's telling the story, and who's listening to the story, right? And it's just says a lot about the way the different faces of racism and how that's changed over the years, I think, because it's we started with slavery, chattel slavery, and then it went into sharecropping, and then Jim Crow, and then now with this mass incarceration, right? And all of these things are built on stories, right, that we're telling about other people to oppress them. It's just I think that that's really crazy that they tied it all together.
Yeah. I'm telling you, genius. They nailed it. And it's the more you watch it, the more you're going to catch and be like, wait, this is really what this is.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're cut scene back to kind of Anthony. He's freaking out.
Yeah.
He's peeling his hand off, essentially.
I said, Anthony has fallen asleep in the studio and his hand is fucked. Absolutely fucked. It's disgusting.
And it's kind of, it's got a honeycomb thing. And if you're a trypophobia person,
not gonna have a good time.
No. And then kind of meanwhile, while Anthony is sprawled on the floor, surrounded by glass, his hand is rotting.
Yeah.
Brianna is in a museum, art museum, something like that, talking to one of the other black women at the dinner.
From the dinner,
yeah, from the dinner, who's like a big fancy art.
Well, because at the dinner, she was like, "You should come join us." Blah, blah, blah. So now we're there with her.
Yeah.
And I made note of this conversation because it was interesting to me because it kind of falls on really what Anthony's conversation with the art critic was like. It's like yet again another conversation for a black woman that is pitted in sensationalizing something that has happened to her, because she's talking about her dad dying, because obviously he was, I guess, a relatively large artist, and the shit happening with Anthony's paintings, and you can kind of tell she's almost like tiptoeing her way through this conversation, because you can tell she's uncomfortable, because she's like, this isn't what I fucking came here for. Like, I wanted to talk about like my business, stuff. My stuff. So,
and so did you catch this? They're standing beneath a gigantic neon sign that says, "You're obviously in the wrong place."
Oh, I don't think I caught that.
Yeah. And another thing that I caught is like,
I'm telling you, I love it. I love it. He's so good.
Yeah. And so another part in that conversation is that this other art person bringing up 3 different men in her life that are like around, like they were not talking about her. She's talking about the men in her life, right? It kind of ignoring about her own goals and her own stuff, and it was just about the men and their trauma and everything.
Yeah.
And I put in my notes, I was like, does this film pass the Bechdel test? Because I'm
probably not.
Yeah, I'm thinking not. So yeah, back to Anthony. Anthony finally kind of gets in contact with his mom.
Before that, so his skin issue has spread to his face.
Yes.
So now it's like fucking like up his neck, kind of like into his cheek, and he's in the hospital.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is where he learns, because they're like, "Welcome back."
Yeah.
Like, I was born in the South Side. What are you talking about? And then he goes to visit mom.
Yeah, because he basically has this interaction, and he's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and also him just like walking out of the hospital is pretty interesting. So he goes to visit his mom, who is the same actress from the OG movie.
Yeah, which I was like, that's pretty badass.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And
because again, if you are an OG Candyman, like ride or die,
yeah,
the moment that door opens, when she answers the door, you're probably like, oh my god!
Yeah, exactly. This is, in my first watch, kind of where I started to get a little lost, because I didn't have the background of the original movie. So I kind of, I've come back around to it, but I was having a little bit of an issue with this.
I'm not gonna lie. I kind of hate that they took this movie there.
Yeah, okay.
I
hated it too.
I don't think he needed to be the baby from the original.
I don't think so either.
He didn't need to be that involved. Yeah. Like, it wasn't necessary. You had me on the train of it's a whole hive. It is men that have been abused or murdered for no... You had me on that fucking path. You didn't need... I didn't need it.
I didn't need it either. And I've learned this about myself. I fucking hate chosen one narratives so much. I hate them. I think they're cheap. I think they're just like a cop out. I think that this is probably like, I don't want to say fan service, but like kind of like OG fan service, whereas people who had watched it and loved it will be like, oh my god, Anthony. But I thought it was much more interesting for it to be, he's just an artist consumed. He has his own background, but it still connects to this trauma of being a black man, right? Because you don't have to have all the same experiences in order to have that trauma, because this kind of the challenges of being a black man are replicated across the country forever.
Yeah.
Also,
I guess just to clarify, since we just kind of had a conversation by ourselves, and I don't know if we explicitly explained that plot point.
Yeah.
So in the original Candyman, Candyman steals a baby that Helen Lyle basically gets back and returns back to the mother.
Yes.
Well, Anthony is that fucking baby.
Anthony is the baby. The baby from the tail, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't need it. I didn't need that. I thought it was fine, perfect.
Yeah.
And then they dropped the Chosen One narrative, and I was like, well,
yeah.
And
then, yeah, Anthony is in the projects.
Yes.
I think at dark or close to dark, and he's
Yes.
kind of, he's got like roaming around type vibes, like in a trance, he's not with us anymore.
He's not doing too hot.
Yeah.
He's having a moment.
Yeah. You can fucking say that much. His moment's about to really pick up speed.
Yeah.
So then the wife goes to the laundromat to try and find him.
Mm-hmm.
And then gets snatched up by
Billy.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing. Why Billy? Well, first of all, also, why Anthony? Why was Anthony chosen by Candyman in the first place?
Yeah.
Why wasn't Billy ever... Billy was so close to Candyman and stuff. Why wasn't he ever snapped up or murdered?
So, in this, I hope I can recount this appropriately with my brain. So, when we're talking to Mom talks about somewhere in the line, they got to a point where as long as Candyman didn't get summoned again, everybody was safe. Okay?
Okay.
We have that in the conversation with Mom. So then, wife goes to the laundromat, gets snatched up by Billy. Then we get a cut scene with a group of kids. And it is a sister in the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then there is a boy outside the bathroom.
Yes.
I took that to be Billy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sister summons Candyman, gets sliced and diced to shit inside the bathroom, and then Billy, for a moment, when he opens the door, sees blood and looks up and sees Candyman in the mirror.
Yeah. Okay.
So
like his sister summoned him, brought him back, and then started kind of this whole new cycle.
And now he's a servant of Candyman, I guess?
Yeah. See, I'm getting a little lost here.
I know.
We're getting a little messy with
we're
the
getting
lore.
a little muddy towards the end.
Yeah, it turns kind of like, from this point, turns kind of less folklore-y, more kind of like slasher.
Yeah.
Just like straight slasher. And again is like oddly targeting. So Billy takes Brianna to this church, this whitewashed church in Cabrini Green that used to be like this historic black church, and then it was literally whitewashed, which was such a good touch.
Yeah.
Anthony's there, still not looking too hot.
Tied up. Not with us. Looking necrotic as shit.
Yeah.
Wherein I think the honeycomb effect is definitely getting more clear at this point.
It's very prominent. Really hate it. Good body horror, but also like just imagining that on my skin makes me want to tear all of it off.
Yeah.
I think I might have a little bit of a trypophobia thing. Just a little bit.
Nailed that down with us. But in the scene, he does his best to turn our man Anthony into Candyman.
He definitely
just
puts in his best effort.
Takes to sawing that hand right off, jams a hook in there, puts the jacket on him, all while the wife is fucking watching.
Yes. And he's giving this like speech, right? But prior to him sawing his hand literally off, he calls the cops.
Yes.
And he's freaking out, and he's telling the cops that there is a black man in his 30s running around. He thinks he's the person who's responsible for the murders. So that's important there. And he says this really interesting thing about, he goes, when something leaves a stain, because there's this stain, right, that is sunken into this community, right? Yeah. When something leaves a stain, even when you wash it out, you can still feel it. And he's like, we need Candyman. And I'm like, why? What are we doing? And then it kind of was clicking to me where it's like, he's weaponizing it, right? He's weaponizing Candyman against like the people who are spreading the stories, like those white girls in the school, right?
Yeah.
Spreading this story on a wider level as a weapon for like to go against like the oppressors and stuff, which I thought was really interesting. So now this like kind of true narrative can infect these people that have largely controlled the narrative.
Yeah.
And I just still don't get why it had to be Anthony. Um, he does say another interesting thing too, where he's like, when he's sticking the hook into his arm, he's like, see, you can really make the story your own, but see, some of the specifics have to be consistent. He's literally, I feel like, talking to the audience at that point.
Yeah.
Like, literally, it's like, we are doing what we want, but we are sticking also true to some of the like the iconic parts of it.
Yeah.
Which I think is very like a meta moment. And I do love like meta moments in media. I think they're really fun.
And then I really feel like in that scene, he's like building, right? And he's kind of, obviously it's a bit of a narrative at this point. And then you can hear the sirens approaching in the background.
Yeah.
And he's like, here comes the swarm. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, we are going someplace weird now.
Yes.
And then the wife manages to escape.
Yes. Billy goes after her.
Yes. And uses her phone camera as a flashlight. I was like, technology being used accurately. Who does he force to eat the candy as sacrament with the razor blade in it? He did. He eats it.
Did he?
Billy eats it.
Okay,
yes.
Okay.
And chases her down, and then she runs away, and then eventually stabs him to death.
Yes,
with the pin from the laundromat. I was like, that's a good touch.
I also really like that scene too, because I think that like Brianna is such like an underrated character in this whole. She's like a very like kind of background character for a lot of it, but then really kind of this story kind of comes back around for her.
Yeah.
And that moment of her when she's stabbing Billy, like that was such a visceral moment, right? Like her rage of like, it's like a woman's rage of like being reflected back on a man who tried to hurt you. It was great. It was so powerful.
I will say, rewatching this and getting to this last scene, I do remember the first time I watched it, since we were still in such the thick of post George Floyd and protesting and just trying to absorb all of that, I cried in that scene.
Oh, really?
The way she so violently stabs him, then Anthony shows up as Candyman, but very calmly says, I think he's dead.
Yeah.
And like he's still very much still Anthony. He's not a threat to her.
Yeah.
And they basically just get to the point where she's holding him
because he's like rotting, dying,
and he just had his arm chopped off and a hook jammed in it, and just the way they shot that scene of her holding him, screaming for help, and all you can see is her, and you hear the cops and you hear the guns unload, and I'm like, this is the fucking lived experience of so many Black and brown people in this country, and it is earth-shattering.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's and again, we get that where we don't see, Anthony getting shot, which I really appreciate, because we don't fucking need. We don't need
more of it.
It's that kind of like tastefulness, kind of similar to like in like Run Sweetheart Run, where we don't see the actual assault, like, but it's still just as like traumatizing and powerful. It's interesting, but I was thinking too about Anthony kind of rotting and dying essentially and being confused about that, and I think it's kind of like he's losing his agency in the story because he's getting overtaken by this folklore, and he's going to be overtaken by this narrative that's going to be told about him by the cops, right?
That's yeah.
So I think obviously like he has a traumatic injury and stuff, but I think that just like his kind of slowly fading away into the story is interesting.
I just had an epiphany, and we're going to get into this in the obsession portion. I am in a film class and we have to choose a scene in a movie that really strongly impacted us. And I was like, where do I even start with this?
Right.
I might actually choose this last scene of Candyman.
Yeah. Sick. Yeah.
Because just the way it plays out, because then you realize all the cops that showed up are white.
Yes, naturally.
And of course, she just had to kill someone, witnessed her husband being murdered, and now they have her in handcuffs.
Yep.
And put her in the back of the squad car, and you basically get this narrative between her in the back seat and the white cop in the front seat, basically going,
very unfortunate what happened to your man in there.
Basically going, you need to be really fucking careful about what you say about how tonight went down is essentially what he's trying to get at. The way your man ran at the cop and threatened him.
And the cop had to discharge his weapon, right? That passive language that you see even like now in newspaper articles, this passive language that takes the accountability away from like the act of murdering someone is crazy. And just also just like another really good disgustingly realistic touch to this film, because that's literally how the newspapers write about the cops killing black men. It's like, you know, it's good. It's good that they wrote it this way, right?
And then she manages to get out of it by summoning Candyman.
Yes.
And she very calmly asks the cop in the front, "Can I see myself?"
Yeah.
And he, like a fucking idiot, turns the mirror to her, and she says Candyman 5 times.
Yep.
And he shows up and fucking obliterates all the cops, and I'm like, oh, so good.
Yeah.
And she gets out of the car. I think Anthony opens it.
Yeah,
it's how that door opens.
Well, and I think that like as he's going, and he's again like really great kills. You know, like just epic kills.
We see some from inside, so like you of course hear the bees.
Yes.
And then you're inside and you see a few of them, and then the door opens and the one in the front gets killed, and then one goes off running. And then I think we hear more sirens in the back, so the wife goes to run. And then I think the scene I'm going to choose is it's like an alleyway, and she's looking down this little alleyway through the grate, and it's Candyman killing the last cop. And the head at this point is really just a beehive.
Yeah.
But then it settles. And this is the first time you can really tell it's fucking Tony Todd from the original. And he says, "Tell everyone."
Yes.
And like, come on. Because that's a line of his from the original. "Tell everyone."
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. He says another thing that is very similar to some of the OG language too. When he's like walking around the car and killing the cops, he goes, "I am the writing on the walls. I am the sweet smell of blood in the street. The buzz in the alleyways. They say I shed the blood of the innocent. You are far from innocent, but they'll say that you are, and that's all that matters."
Identical from Clive Barker. That is from his short story.
Great.
Because I highlighted it, because I was like, this sounds awfully familiar. And I was like, they took this fucking word for word.
Yeah. And I just, the "tell everyone" is so good, because it's like, it's spread the word, spread the story, and Candyman's like, they're taking and changing the narrative and turning it against the oppressors.
Yeah.
And it's just great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And that's
and then as the credit rolls, we get more shadow puppets.
Yes.
And it is acting out the murders of all the men that make up the hive or swarm of Candyman. So we're seeing really all of our main stories that got told throughout. I think there's like 5 of them that we hear.
5
of like
or 6.
Yeah. And then at the very end, it kind of arranges like those 5 into, it's like a massive crowd. And you know it's not just 5, it's way too many.
It's way too many. Yeah. And that's Candyman.
And I will say, I then found out that they have a website to go with this movie It's candymanmovie.com/impact. And it's like it has a couple different things, but one of them is it's like there's like a 48-page companion guide.
Yes.
For the movie.
Yes.
If you make a movie that is so incredible, you can make essentially a 50-page PDF that walks people through themes and concepts as you focus on. You are fucking amazing. That is a dream.
And you know,
if I could manage to do that before I die, I would say my life has been one.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
It is incredible, and they have stuff about like some really awesome nonprofits and stuff, and like resources and professors and all this stuff. Yeah, I read through that, and I really kind of clung on to some of the stuff they were saying about folklore because it's like
reflection sections. So good.
But yeah,
so what do you think?
I loved it. It's great. I loved it, and I'm glad that I watched it again because, like I said, I saw it in theaters in like 2021 when it was out, and I liked it, but I didn't think about it a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't sitting there thinking about I was going to have a 3-hour discussion about it, and then so I'm watching it again.
And then you met me, and I was like, ha! Guess what?
Exactly. And but no, I really appreciate it. I just wish that they didn't go with the chosen one narrative
again. Because I guess I'm trying to frame it in like Halloween is my like ride or die. So I'm like trying to tell myself if someone were to take the original, like to redo this, I think as like an OG fan of Halloween, you probably could have given me some nuggets that I would be like, oh my God. And I think, like you said, like I think
that's
did
probably
that
kind of what that was.
Can you give our girl Nia a Google, or if she's still up? I didn't look into if she's done anything else because
she has, I believe.
I would imagine.
She has a credit for The Marvels, a movie called Little Woods, and interestingly, a credit to 28 Years Later Part 2, which I did not know existed. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that might be Google being a little weird.
The AI being AI.
What?
Are we reporting breaking news here?
Possibly. This is 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, slated to be released in 2026. Directed by Nia DaCosta.
Fuck me running. Are you kidding?
Yeah. Hang on. Yeah, it's supposed to be the sequel to 28 Years Later. Okay.
Wow.
That's interesting.
That is some fucking news, people.
What?
That is incredible. Because I was just gonna say I haven't watched anything else from her, and I feel bad because like when I reference Candyman 2021, I just like make it a Jordan Peele movie because it's Monkey Paw Productions, it's his style, but she very much wrote it, directed it, and you would have to imagine that either it's hers or she just agrees with the vision that he has and just carried that in her own light, because I think it is very much her style cinematically. Like it is her. I don't think it doesn't really replicate what else Jordan has done. So I think damn, you heard it here first on Reflections of Horror podcast. We're getting a 28 Years Later Part 2, and Nia DaCosta is going to direct it.
Yes, excellent.
That is exciting.
Yeah, that is. That's crazy. I'm actually freaking out.
Thank God you got the laptop out. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm obsessed with it. I watched this originally because of Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele will be one of the first men that we cover because I love his movies.
Yeah.
So that's how I found this.
Nope is a perfect film.
Yes.
We need to talk about it.
If my 70-year-old mother loves Nope, come on.
I can't even get my mom to watch Nope.
Oh my God. The bitch watched it once and then she was like, can you put that on? Like, we got it for her on DVD. She loves it. Anyway, so I love it. I think this is a masterpiece. I think Jordan Peele is one of our greats of our generation. Like,
absolutely.
absolutely hold that true. I think he is one of our great names that we have got to experience.
It's so funny because he was a comedian.
I know. I forget that.
Yeah, he was a Key and Peele.
Yeah.
Like I watched that shit in high school. You know,
no,
and
he is a horror king.
You know,
in my eyes.
He's like horror king.
I've literally never watched Key and Peele.
Oh,
never.
There's some pretty funny bits actually, but yeah, and Jordan Peele also has an anthology that he edited. Did you know this?
Yeah. The book, right?
Yes, out there screaming.
Yes, that was one of the first audiobooks I ever listened to.
Oh, nice.
I was devastated because someone on TikTok made something that made it seem like they were going to make that into a movie, and I about flipped a lid, and then I did more clicking, and I was like, this is just for the fucking book. I've already read the book, but the book is amazing. You should read it. The audiobook was really good, too, because it's narrated... I tried to look into it. It almost sounded like each author narrated their portion, but I don't know if it was actually the author, but there is a different narrator for each portion, so it's really cool. They're very good stories. I love that book.
Nice. Yeah, I it's been on my list for a while. I haven't read it yet. I'm gonna get through it this year.
You would probably speed through it. Oh, yeah. It's a very quick read.
Yeah. I got the hardcover, so it seems kind of thick.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, so for the other Peele fans out there, there is a book that he put together of a anthology of black horror, essentially.
I just love that I feel like he had 3 big movies. He has his footing, and then he went, let me make a production company and let me do things like putting an anthology together so I can amplify other black voices.
Yeah, it's awesome. I wonder... He has nothing that I see coming
cooking
out yet.
See, I just feel like he's really focused on his production company, but that's fine.
That's awesome.
Continue to give me good content, even if it's not directly from you, Jordan. What are we obsessed with? What do you want to yap about?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I finally had a little bit of time off, and I settled in and I watched this show that I've been meaning to watch forever because I got my little brother's HBO Max login.
Nailed it.
Thank you. And
enjoy it while it lasts. Allegedly, they're cracking down on password sharing.
Ugh, disgusting.
We'll see if they pull it off like Netflix. But anyway, sorry. Go on. What did we watch?
So I've been meaning to watch this show. It's called the Jerrod Carmichael reality show on Max.
Okay.
So Jerrod Carmichael is a comedian, and he's put out several specials. I watched them all, and I watched his like latest like comedy special is called Rothaniel, and it is directed by Bo Burnham.
Oh,
so that's kind of what got me down the pipeline, right? And so it's I wrote a little synopsis here. It's a reality show surrounding this comedian and his life. It's footage of him in his like day-to-day kind of narrating things, and with some practice shots of him at performances talking about the things that were filmed in his life.
Okay.
And and then he's like literally like in therapy, right? So it's him it's him going through life as this, like, he came out as a gay man in his 30s.
Yeah.
And he's black. His family is super religious. It's focusing on his like relationship with his dad and his partner and his like serial cheating habits.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so great. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's like unlike anything I think I've ever seen before because it's so real and uncomfortable and funny and sad, and it's just this kind of weird, like it feels so real that it's hard for me to believe that it's actually scripted, because there's this one part where he's having a discussion with his dad about him, you know, coming out.
Yeah.
And his dad being like, well, no, his dad was a serial cheater too.
Yeah.
And he's like confronting him about that. And he's like, I don't know why we're talking about this. Why do we have cameras? Why are you talking about this? He's like, yeah, maybe I do have the cameras so I can confront this stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's how I am able to do that.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's just super raw and just, I don't know. It's hard to articulate because it's so different.
Yeah.
It's a reality show that's also comedy, that's also art, that's also diary, that's also therapy.
That's a lot.
You know, it is. And he covers like queerness and masculinity and race and all of this stuff, and it's so good. I loved it. I watched almost all of it. I watched almost all of it in a day, and then I got halfway through the last episode, and I had to go to sleep. And then I didn't realize that it was last episode, so I sat down, after work to watch it. And I'm like, what do you mean that's it?
Oh, that is like one of the most heartbreaking things when you're like, wow, how am I done with this already?
Yeah, and it's just like one of those shows that is doing interesting things with like what it means to film yourself and put yourself on display and be famous.
Yeah.
Which is very much there's no credit to Bo Burnham in this show, right? Because Bo's been missing or whatever for like a year and a half now. And but his influence is there for sure. And he literally, I think, is in it because there's this masked, very tall, masked white man who talks with his hands, who talks with Jerrod about like what he's doing with this project and how it's going to be received and why he's doing what he's doing. And I'm like, that's Bo Burnham. That's Bo Burnham wearing a mask. What are we doing?
I am almost on the Bo Burnham train.
Almost.
With everything
just
you're like I'm gonna get there because it is a very interesting arc of a human.
He's so interesting. So his influence is there, obviously, and then there's a lot of influences of inside in it, in this idea of filming yourself and what it means to perform and to like, because like Jerrod's comedy style is really weird too. Like he essentially came out in his comedy special that Bo directed, which is like crazy. And then like he came out, that special dropped, and then he was essentially like estranged from his family, and then the reality show is him coming back and confronting his family.
Oh shit.
Yeah, dude,
there's a lot to this, man.
There's a lot to it, and it's just good. It's just really good.
I love that for you.
Yeah, I love it too. And then obviously I'm back on my, thanks to you and you lighting my hope that Bo is back. He's not back. It's fake. I think it's fake.
Like a good friend, I was scrolling the TikTok and saw a conspiracy and just exploding that Bo Burnham had started a TikTok account and was back and was hinting at a new something project or something.
Yeah.
So I sent it to Kale like a good friend, and then I followed up in a text message of, did you see the TikTok I sent you?
Yes. Yeah. So. And Reddit says probably no, and I haven't watched all the videos myself, but I'm thinking also probably no. But not to say that it won't one day happen, you know, but obviously that got me back down my inside rabbit hole, and I was listening to it on the way here and listening to it while I was doing inventory, and like just reminded of like how insane I am about that thing, and how I really want to write like I could write a dissertation on Inside.
I love it. Things that I've been there.
Yeah,
I have things where I'm like, I could write like 100-page dissertation on this.
Yes, yeah, I think I'm gonna try actually.
I think it would be
awesome. I have notes, and I just got to figure out how I want to structure it.
Yeah.
But I'm spiraling back into my Bo nonsense, and the Jerrod Carmichael reality show didn't help. So
that's okay.
There we are. That's my obsession.
That's the perfect start to 2025 for you, in my opinion. That's perfect.
Yeah. What are you obsessed with?
Well, I'm obsessed with vampires. It's official. It started with the Interview with the Vampire. I'm now reading Lesbian Vampire Smut, and it quickly transpired to like me not caring about the smut and just like really feeling for this female vampire, and I was like, she deserves love. She's like 1,000 years old, and like she just really cares about this girl.
You know what?
I just feel for him.
Yeah, you need to read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson.
I know you told me that. I need to.
It's good. I think you'd love it. It's gay.
Let me add it to the list. I probably will get there because we always end up in a conversation about that. And if this vampire obsession of mine continues, I saw Nosferatu. 100% not my style, but like, goddamn, like dark gothic. Like that's not my style movie. I'm here to watch people get chopped up.
Yeah.
But like, so beautiful. The ending scene. It's still in theaters, but the ending scene of Nosferatu is the most beautiful cinematic scene I've ever seen.
Oh my god!
And I'm not going to even say anything about it because I don't want to ruin it for
I know, I haven't seen it yet.
Other listeners. But like even the ending of Nosferatu, I was like, I think Count Orlok, like, really just loved her. Like, I just have so many of these, because I think, like, vampires they're hypersexualized, but, like, at the end of it, it's also, like, if you lived for eternity, what are you living for? Well, really just to find partners in love, because you are experiencing decades of hobbies and learning things or whatever, but at the end of the day, you are looking for someone to love and to give love to, and I'm just like,
well, it kind of that reminds me of, like, during the theater scene with the stat in Interview with a Vampire, and he's like going into the thing, and he's like he's like, Louis threatened me with this loneliness, and he touches like a human and makes that human like feel that loneliness. So good. Like, Lestat, gaslighter, manipulator, bitch, but I felt for him in that moment.
I am in a headspace. I think vampires act like that because they just have too many emotions and they have gone through too much, and you can't expect them to be nice all the time.
Yeah, no, literally, they're monsters. Their morals are gonna be different. They're gonna behave differently to each other.
So real obsessed with vampires at the moment. Need to buy Dracula, the book. I need to read that. And then outside of that, guys, I am in a film class in Chicago, and I went to my first class and I fucking loved it. And I'm like having a little bit of a moment because obviously I've been having an existential crisis it's almost been a full year since I just like fucking up and quit my career and was like, how am I gonna make money? What am I gonna do for the rest of my life? And I was just like sitting in this class and I was like, this is actually really fucking interesting to me.
That's
and I'm
awesome.
actually like really nerding out about this. And like immediately, like we were talking about like coverage of a shot, like how to shoot what angles. And then like, of course, like I went home and like we were just like watching a TV show and I was like, oh, the coverage of this, like they're having a conversation, but it's the same angle. And like, I just, and then like I was telling Kale off mic, like, so I unfortunately have to drive all the way to Chicago for this. So I like drove back and then like, on the way back, I was like thinking about, because I've always wanted to do a short film. That's the big thing. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to get into short films right now. And like, I just like got this idea and I was like, I think we can pull this off. And I need to sit down and write the script, but I have like 2 pages full of notes of how to do it. And I don't know. I'm excited. I'm feeling good. I have an artistic outlet.
Yes.
I think it's going to be good. Shout out to Sage. Sage helped me with my first bit of homework for class. She let me take some photos. So
nice.
Yeah, it's good. So that's my current obsession. So keep an eye out. I'm gonna challenge myself to put some of the shit on YouTube.
Yeah, do it.
Because through this podcast, I've learned that there's no point in creating shit and not sharing it.
Yeah.
Because I'm always really bashful about it and I don't want to tell anybody, but
share it.
you are the biggest advocate for screaming it from the rooftops, and I'm trying to take a note out of that book and share it. So keep your eyes peeled, because shit that I make, I will shove it down everybody's throat.
Excellent.
And hopefully I'll become famous.
Yes, hopefully. Well, take me along a ride with you.
Of course. You want a movie deal? You gotta fund the podcast.
Thank you. All right.
Next episode.
Next episode.
Blink Twice. Our girl Zoe Kravitz. It is going to be incredible. There is Beyonce music involved. You guys are going to love it. Bit of a trigger warning for sexual assault, just an FYI, which we will get into it in the episode, but I did love that it was kind of worked a bit weird that never came up in like trailers and the publicizing the movie, but then when you do turn the movie on, the very first screen gives you that trigger warning. So I was like, I think that's the first time I've ever seen a production company put a trigger warning at the beginning of a movie.
For a film, sure. I don't think I've ever seen it. I've seen it on like episodes, of shows like this episode contains this kind of content.
Yeah.
Like, if you were just
kudos to them. But
awesome.
You can find it on MGM Plus. Apparently on Amazon as well. Like you can rent it or buy it.
And then it's coming to Prime in like 8 days, apparently. After I rented it. So
which honestly, the timing of when this drops, you might be able to get it for free then on Amazon Prime. So our gift to you. Yeah. But yeah, that's it, guys. We'll see you next time for Blink Twice. Bye.
Bye.
Girls, watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.